I can still feel it in memory, that subtle lift in the chest, that private grin that says, I've cracked it. Not loudly, not as a speech, as a mood. I start treating ordinary reality like it is a beginner's level. Sleep becomes optional because I am seeing. The body becomes background noise because I am transcending. I hear myself giving advice without too much certainty. I catch the way I speak around my own process, as if I am above the rules that hold other people in place. The lived moment is not a dramatic collapse. It is a quiet, spiritual arrogance. It is the way the mind tries to turn a glimpse into a crown. This is where the mythic mirror arrives, the night sea journey. In Jungian myth analysis, the night sea is the passage where the hero drifts into dark waters and the old compass stops working. You lose daylight logic. You lose applause. The danger is not the ocean. The danger is believing you are already the captain. Psychology might call this inflation, when the ego borrows the voltage of the unconscious and mistakes charge for character. Insight becomes a costume. Meaning becomes a drug. The rebel archetype hides inside it too. The part of me that wants to refuse correction, refuse apology, refuse the humiliation of being ordinary. There is always a temptation to reclaim the feeling of sacred specialness by making myself the exemption to the rule. Somewhere inside that, another question begins to matter. Is this still insight? Or is this the first moment breakdown is asking to be renamed initiation so I can avoid responsibility? That is the threshold. The cost shows up fast because meaning never cancels consequence. If you do not sleep, your discernment thins. If you do not eat, your nervous system lies. If you isolate, you lose reality checks. I did not need a demon to punish me. I needed my own biology to remind me it has laws. So I return to the thread before the descent deepens. I remember that the point of the labyrinth is not to feel special. It is to become responsible. And responsibility begins with the smallest sentence I can say without performance. I might be wrong. The humiliation does not arrive as theatre. It arrives as a hard edge in reality that refuses my story. A plan does not work. A person does not agree. A consequence does not negotiate. In that moment, I feel the heat in my face. The urge to explain my way out of being wrong. The lived anchor is simple. Reality humiliates the ego. I want to climb back into an interpretation where I am still the hero. But reality does not care about my narrative. The mythic mirror is a Polynesian underworld voyage. Stories where the traveler enters a realm below the surface and discovers that the rules are not the traveler's rules. You do not charm the underworld. You learn its currents. Another set of old images sits behind it too. Prometheus bringing fire. Cassandra speaking what no one believes. Prophets and saintly figures carrying truths that do not protect them from consequence. Those myths matter only if used carefully. They can illuminate the cost of truth-telling, but they can also seduce a person into believing every frustration is persecution and every boundary is proof of special knowledge. That is the danger. Psychologically, this is a corrective experience. The world reasserting boundary when the mind has started acting as if boundary is optional. The nervous system hears no and wants to turn it into a sign, but the disciplined reading is quieter. Sometimes no is just no. Sometimes it is law. Sometimes it is the body. Sometimes it is another human being's boundary. If I am honest, the humiliation is medicine. It collapses the fantasy that insight exempts me from feedback. It returns me to community, because community is where I get reality tested. It returns me to sleep. It returns me to witness writing too, to naming what happened without gaslighting myself or turning myself into a martyr. So I practice the return. I keep my voice measured. I do not escalate. I do not go deeper to avoid repair. I do the next basic thing that keeps me tethered. I repair what I can. I accept what I cannot. I treat the underworld like any other teacher, steady, indifferent, and ultimately protective, because it will not let my ego drive the boat. After the humiliation, something sharper appears, not outside, inside. A flash of contempt, a hunger to dominate, a pleasure in being right, a wish to disappear so no one can see me fall. The lived anchor is confrontation with personal shadow, and it feels like meeting a stranger who has been living in my house the whole time. The shadow has my face. It knows my language. It even borrows my spirituality and weaponizes it. The mythic mirror is Ragnarok forewarning, the old Norse sense that the end begins long before the end, that a cold knowledge spreads through the world. What has been denied will return with force. In the psyche, forewarning looks like signals, instability, racing interpretation, impulse, the feeling that rules do not apply, because the moment is important. But there are other mirrors here too. The sacred clown, the Heyoka, the holy fool, the ecstatic saint who breaks rules and reveals truth through inversions. Those figures exist for a reason, but they are dangerous to identify with too quickly. The ego loves them because they make taboo feel noble. They make disruption feel wise. They make chaos look like revelation. Gnostic images of wisdom fallen into chaos carry the same risk. Psychology might call this a shrinking window of tolerance, arousal arising, inhibition dropping, narrative speed increasing. The shadow does not announce itself as shadow. It announces itself as justification. If I romanticize it, I am already lost. If I call it sacred simply because it is intense, I have handed it the steering wheel. So I name it without worship. I do not call it destiny. I call it material, human material. Then I do the unglamorous work. I keep my commitment so the day does not become a blank canvas for fantasy. I limit stimulation. Ragnarok forewarning is not a prophecy about the world ending. It is a warning about my inner world. If I do not bring structure to this energy, it will bring structure to me through conflict, collapse, and consequences I cannot undo. So I tighten the thread. I choose discipline over drama. I choose responsibility over revelation. The next blow is quieter and more painful. I start noticing hypocrisy within the self. The very standards I speak about, humility, restraint, service, when it suits my image. I hear my words and feel the gap, like a cold stone in the chest. There is a specific embarrassment in seeing yourself do the thing you thought you had outgrown. Not once. Repeatedly, the mind tries to defend it. It tries to intellectualize it. It tries to say, this is just a phase. But the body knows. The body contracts. The breath gets shallow. The stomach turns. The mythic mirror is the hero swallowed by darkness. That universal motif where the traveler is taken inside something bigger, something that strips presence because there is nowhere left to perform. Inside that darkness, you cannot impress anyone. You can only be honest. Psychologically, this is the moment the persona cracks. The created identity cannot hold the pressure of the unconscious. There is grief in that, because hypocrisy is not only moral failure, it is also a sign that I was using spiritual language as armor. The darkness exposes where I was avoiding ordinary accountability, the repairs I postponed, the routines I let slide because I was in a process. But process does not erase impact. Meaning never cancels consequence. This is where writing changed function for me, not as self-expression and not as theatre, but as testimony. I needed a place to tell the truth without polishing it, to write to the version of me who still wanted to perform, to write to the future self who would otherwise forget how slippery self-image becomes under this kind of pressure, to separate what happened from how I wanted to be seen. Integration began there, in the ordinary, unflattering labor of weaving fragments into something honest. Honest enough to actually stand on. So the grounding return is practical, almost boring. I apologize where I can without theatrics. I tell the truth without making it a performance. I stop trying to be seen as a good man and focus on doing the next right thing. I would keep my world small enough to manage. The darkness does not have to be an enemy. It can be a containment chamber, like being swallowed so I cannot run. When I accept that, the swallowing becomes instruction. No more pretending, only practice. Humility begins the moment I stop arguing with reality, not as defeat, but as orientation. I feel it in the body first. The shoulders drop, the jaw unclenches. The breath deepens as if it has space again. The lived anchor is simple. Humility begins. It is a turning of the face toward what is true, even if it bruises my self-image. The mythic mirror is shadow confrontation. In Jungian psychology, the act of turning inward what I would rather not see, without collapsing into shame and without escalating into grandiosity. The shadow is not a monster to slay once. It is a relationship to tend. It contains aggression, desire, fear, genius, cruelty, tenderness. Human material that becomes dangerous only when it is unconscious. Psychology might call humility the capacity for integration, the ability to hold complexity without splitting into I am enlightened or I am broken. This is where the thread becomes non-negotiable. Sleep is not a performance, it is containment. The body is not decoration, it is the altar that tells the truth. Law and consequence are not enemies. They are guardrails that keep the descent from turning into harm. Community is not an audience. It is accountability. Ordinary life is not beneath the process. It is the process. The real test is whether depth can survive routine. Work, bills, basic care, small obligations, repeated return. Whether I can carry both worlds, the symbolic and the ordinary, without needing either one to cancel the other. So I make a vow that is not mystical at all. I will regulate before I interpret. I will ask for help before I escalate. I will choose responsibility over intensity. I will treat insight like weather, real and powerful. I will let service be measured by conduct, not self-image. And when the mind tries to turn humility into another badge, I return to the simplest practice. Breathe and eat and rest and show up and tell the truth and do what is required. Even if I feel nothing, even if it is not poetic. One foot stays in ordinary work and bills and basic care. That is how the underworld becomes survivable. That is how the spirals stay sacred without becoming madness. That is how you can live between both worlds. That is what it means to be a true edge walker.